Now we have very upset in Rockford, Michigan, and very upset says that I live on the west side of the state, but I bought a property on the east side of Michigan. I want to use the property as a cannabis dispensary. I relied upon my real estate agent, who told me that she checked with the city about the location of the property and that it is zoned for cannabis. After we closed, I went to speak with the planning department head. He said that with about $300,000 investments for improvements, I could get the building approved. He also told me that they had given this information to my realtor several weeks earlier. I would have never purchased this property going in knowing about this. What rights do I now have? From very upset in Rockford.
I feel badly for Rockford, but I'm going to tell Rockford, the realtor or the real estate agent, and you've heard me say this so many times, but
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if I had $1 for every time that I said this, we wouldn't be talking today. I'd be down in Florida, right? In nice weather. Real estate agents, their job is to sell the real estate, okay? Or to help you purchase the real estate. If
Correct.
you have due diligence that relates to legal requirements for licensing or zoning, and that's a zoning issue, and then you're also getting involved in cannabis licensing and what's required under the cannabis laws in Michigan, you need to have the right people in place. And I don't know the quality or the credentials of this realtor, but if they're a salesperson, they're not going to be legally responsible to you for making sure that you're in compliance with the cannabis laws or the zoning laws related to cannabis. Right. First thing I would have, a cannabis attorney. That's what I would have done initially for licensing purposes. We deal with a lot of cannabis attorneys when it comes to the real estate, securing the real estate. So we're real estate attorneys, but I'm not a specialist in cannabis licensing. I have no idea how that works. Okay. So I would have to defer that over to a cannabis attorney. Okay. Now, if you relied on this realtor and you didn't, this is a different issue. Your real estate agent still has a fiduciary duty to tell you, hey, I'm selling you this building, but I learned from the city that
Right.
you're going to have $300,000 worth of improvements, or 400, I don't know what they said, but you have to improve this property in order to get it going, to be, to have it approved as a cannabis distribution center or whatever you're going to do with it. And she doesn't tell you, that's a whole different issue. That's a fiduciary responsibility. Okay. Mm-hmm. But my thoughts are, and perhaps they didn't, but who's really to blame here? I mean, let's go back to the beginning of the transaction. You need to do your due diligence, Rockford, on your licensing requirements, on the building requirements. Why would you ever rely on a real estate agent to tell you, except for this information that they know from the city at this point, the planning department? Why would you take their word for it? Or in this case, you didn't get any information. That's the only issue that I could see would be problematic for the realtor. Okay, if they really knew, they should have conveyed that information. But everything else, if you're disappointed that, my goodness, there's a $300,000 price tag on the improvements, why didn't you do that on your own?
Right.
Why didn't you look into a little bit more what was going on with this property and what was required? It's very extensive build out and improvement requirements under the cannabis laws, security, how rooms have to be. I mean, I'm really not that person to get into too much of it. Fortunately or unfortunately, we've represented quite more than several handfuls of business owners who own these distribution centers. We deal with their real estate issues when the parties are fighting. That's a whole different issue, okay? Because they didn't have the right agreements between them. But when it comes to licensing, go to a licensing expert, go to a real, an attorney who does that for their living. Mm-hmm. So it's not that I don't feel, I feel badly for the individual, but I think that they just put too much faith in their realtor. It's not really where they should have placed it. That's it.
And we see this theme in so many different questions where the buyer or the seller, and it's usually the purchaser, puts too much on the real estate agent, gives them more roles than what they actually operate in. And some of it is just being a layman, not really understanding,
Right.
like the length and the depth or whatever, the scope of
Sure.
what the real estate agent's role actually is in your transaction. But part of it, and this just comes into my own mind. So what I didn't tell David earlier before we started recording is I actually just got my license, David.
Oh, good for you.
All of maybe like 6-7 days ago.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So one of the things that has been on my mind going into getting my own license, which I'm getting my license for investing purposes, not so much retail work.
Sure.
However, is why aren't agents more upfront with their their buyer or their seller, the person that they are connecting with? That really isn't my job description. That really isn't my scope of work. Maybe they don't know who they should be referring this person to, but you need to, you, my buyer, you, my seller, really need to go through another channel for this. It just kind of perplexes me. Why do agents shoulder this responsibility, whether it's legal or licensing, et cetera? So.
Right. I mean, I will tell you, it just a file comes to mind. It's recent and it's really disappointing for the client. The client actually purchased, this is a completely different, let's just put it this way. The client purchased a large property and relied on the realtor to write up some language in an addendum that related to net proceeds, annual net lease proceeds, and how much the client would be entitled to from the leases of this property over a 5-year period between my client and what would soon be the new owner of the property. So he retained a right to collect income from the property for 5 years. But the way it was written was so poorly done, and it wasn't done by an attorney. It was actually done by the realtor. And believe it or not, it's a comma. And I've said this, a comma makes the difference and what is really the intent. Oh my God, it's such a sad demonstration of, like, number one, a real estate agent playing in the wrong sandbox, right? They shouldn't be writing. And this is not a small deal. This was almost a multi-million-dollar deal. It's close to $2 million. And the realtor wrote the language, and the client wasn't my client, at the time of the purchase transaction. They relied on this realtor to put this language in. And now they're in litigation over what was really meant by this phrase that the realtor wrote without any guidance from an attorney, from a real estate or contract attorney. So it does happen quite often. It's unfortunate because there really are great realtors out there, but their job is to sell real estate. The same reason is like when somebody, and this happens every week, somebody will call me up and go, "What do you think it's worth, David?" And I'll be like, I'm not a real estate agent. I'm not a licensed appraiser. Don't take my opinion as to the value of this property. That's not my job. And I've actually had people call me later and say, "Why didn't you tell me it was worth X?" Well, that's not my job. My job is to protect you with regards to the documentation, the compliance work. But my job isn't to sit there and step on the toes of a realtor who you rely on to tell you what the value is, or to have the appropriate people lined up to do an inspection. I'm not the inspector. So the same thing, it's very sad, this situation that you're, this question. But in a weird way, if you got, I don't know what they paid for the property either, right? It doesn't say in the question.
Right.
Maybe they got a great deal, right? So for those who are watching, just do your due diligence. Don't be so quick to sign paperwork. One of our taglines is call before you sign, right? Call before you sign. It's so easy. Just call. Anyway, so
yeah.
I hope I answered that question.
No, no, no,
I felt
you
like I was
did.
giving a lecture, and I don't mean, once in a while I go off on those lectures,
Yeah,
but I
no,
give the
yeah.
lectures at home.
No, you answered the question,
Mhm.
and then we did do a little bit of lecturing. But yeah, the moral of the story is stay in your lane, but also understand what lane each person even should be operating in
Sure,
before you move forward.
right.